Okay, so thanks everyone for coming today. I'm going to talk about the analysis of the metabolomics data in the context of networks, but not only, also in the context of pathways. So just a few words about myself. So as you can hear from my accent, I am a French guy. So I'm working for the French National Institute for Agricultural Research. It's the second in the world, and it's spread all around France. The city I am in is Toulouse, which is southwest of France. I am senior research scientist, leading a group of 8 people, mainly computer scientists and people doing modeling. And the most difficult part of my work is to be president of the French-speaking metabolomics network, which is, when you know French people, not always easy. The main focus in our group are metabolomics data analysis, as you will see. So the idea is to improve metabolic fingerprints and to assist in biochemical interpretation of this data. Then, since we are in a food toxicology lab, we work a lot on human metabolism. So we also do that in cancer research. So the idea is to build cell or tissue-specific metabolic networks and simulate metabolic fluxes also. And we do quite a lot of computational biology, and that's the part I'm going to talk about today, mainly focusing on graph algorithms. We do some web development and visualization. So as I said, the main applications are food toxicology and cancer. So the objective of the webinar, it's really an overview, so I won't be able to go in all the details. We will have time for the questions. And so the objective is to understand where the data, the metabolic pathways, the networks, where they come from, to get an overview of the pathway mapping, how you can map your data in the pathways, and the enrichment approach, the advantage and limits of that, and to understand why sometimes you want to use network more than pathways, and how to, based on the networks, extract subnetworks based on the metabolic signature. I will come back to that. What you can get out of it is, as I said, it's basic knowledge that you will have, so the overview and the principles, and most importantly, I think it's to have a critical view of these approaches. So they have pros and cons, and I would like to give you some idea about that. Just then, for you to make the good decisions when you will work on this kind of approach. So two last remarks. I will mention some tools, the one we are developing and others, but there are plenty of others around. It's really then choosing the tool is knowing what you want out of this tool, but also understanding what is behind the tool, and that's the aim of the webinar. And of course, at the end, all the questions are welcome. So in terms of networks, we are really at the end of the pipeline. So you may be aware of all the pipeline in terms of metabolomics. So you go from the sample preparation with key step, the analytical chemistry, so whether NMR or mass spec. Then you will get some metabolites or features. You will do some identification, or the other way around, statistics, then identification. And at the end, when you have, for instance, 2 conditions, you will have a fingerprint, a list of metabolites that are discriminant for this condition. And really the aim of what I'm going to talk today is how can we make sense out of this list of metabolites? How can we help in the interpretation of these things? So really what we try to do is to make sense of this soup and help at least in this direction. One example I will go through in the presentation is one simple study where they exposed yeast to cadmium. So cadmium is a toxicological metal. They did direct infusion mass spec, did the multivariate statistics, and what you typically get at the end of the analysis is what you have on the right-hand side, a list of metabolites and some, for instance, fold changes between the treated versus the non-treated versus treated cell. So that's what we get. And what the people are doing is trying to make sense of this list of metabolites based on their knowledge. The thing is that even if you are the best biochemist in the world, you may not have a global overview about what is metabolism or all the parts of the metabolism. So you may need a bit of bioinformatics to help you in this interpretation. So what we want to do is to identify what are the metabolic processes that are involved based on this list of metabolites. So a lot of these parts are implemented in Phenomenal. So Phenomenal is the EU project that is organizing this webinar and also funding a lot of these developments. So using the Phenomenal workflow, you can go from the raw data to the metabolic fingerprint, so the list of metabolites that are of interest for you. Then we will go together through these steps, which is importing the network. So you cannot do network construction in Phenomenal, but you can import networks that are available. Then we will put the metabolites in the network, and in Phenomenal, you can do some pathway analysis. And the final step will be network analysis. It's ongoing. The inclusion of that is ongoing in Phenomenal. For now, it is in MetExplore, the software that we are developing. So the first step is where the data come from, where the databases are coming from. For instance, KEGG, BioSeq. How do we build this knowledge? So the common way of doing that is to start from genome. So that's why we often call these networks genome scale metabolic network reconstruction. So the idea is to start from the genome and to go to the list of reactions that are possible for one organism. So you take the genome, the annotation of the genome, and for each gene, if they code for an enzyme, then we look for the reactions that this enzyme can catalyze. There are tools that allows you to do that, let's say in a day. There are tools like pathway tools and so on. There are tools available. But the main challenge in that is that you will have what we call a draft reconstruction, meaning that there will be some false positives, reactions that are predicted to be active or feasible for one organism, but which are not, and also false negatives, reactions that are missing in the network. So there is a long step of curation after that. So the first draft one day, and the refinement is an ongoing process. People go by hand through the networks. So what happens is that you will have several releases of the databases. So for instance, we are using Human Metabolic Network. There was a first release called RECON1 in 2008, I think, then a second one in 2013, and now in 2019-18, for the human, there is RECON3D, which is the third release. And it will go on. It will be improved and so on. So it's an ongoing process. So just to summarize, what we want to get is the list of reactions, the enzymes that are catalyzing these reactions, the genes that are corresponding to the enzymes. So it's not a one-one relationship, it could be a bit more complex. And what you get at the end is also using the stoichiometry, you have the list of all the metabolites that can be available in one given organism. So based on the genome, of course. So it gives you a kind of predicted metabolome. So there are some databases that are available. So they do this work. They do this work from genome to reconstruction and also the curation. So KEGG is one of the most famous one that you may be aware of. It's Kyoto Encyclopedia of Gene and Genomes. And the idea of KEGG is that they are quite centralized database where if you find some mistakes, you will have to drop them an email and they will correct it. So I won't go too much into detail. I invite you to go and visit the webpage if you wish to have a look. It's really easy to use. There is a large range of organisms and there are many tools. So it's not only related to metabolomics, there are many tools related to genes also. The limitation is that you don't have information on how much efforts they spent on one particular network. So it could be that they just did the draft reconstruction, and you may have errors in that. So that's one of the main limitations, I think. It's not designed for modeling, so you cannot directly use their data to do the modeling, and they are moving to a licensing way of using the data. You can access the web page free, but if you want to use the data offline, then you have to pay for it. BioSeq is also a quite large database in terms of organisms, maybe a bit more focused on the metabolism than KEGG. They also have a large range of tools. They have an information on the quality of the reconstruction, so they will tell you how much of the reconstruction is done, of the curation. Their way of doing things is a bit different than KEGG. They give you the tools to do the reconstruction. They give it to experts in one organism, and the expert will deal with the BioSeq database for their organism. So for instance, we did one for Trypanosoma brucei, and it was called Trypanoseq, and so we are dealing with the database. So it's it's less centralized than KEGG. It's a bit less user-friendly than KEGG, and they are also moving to a licensing policy. Then so there are other options, as I said, but the last option, which is not a web-based option, this option is based on files. So it's called SBML files. So the idea is to provide into a single file all the information about the metabolic network. So in one single file, you will find all the metabolites, the reactions, the compartments, and how all these things are connected. So there is, of course, a large range of organisms for which you can find this kind of files. They are online. And what is good also is that you can do some modeling using these files. And since it's a standard, you can use it in various software. Of course, it's a text file, so you don't have a nice pictures and so on. So it's not a web interface. So it requires a bit of bioinformatics. Oh, sorry. Yes, the quality also is really depending on who is providing the file. So one of the big advantages is that more and more people who are doing reconstruction for one particular organism, like here you have an example for human, they provide as a supplementary file this big SBML file. So you can then use it in different software. There are some databases that kind of centralize all this, try to centralize all these files, be Human Atlas, Biomodels at EBI, and MetExplore is also having some of these files. So it's a bit different than the two first ones, but it's currently more and more used in the community. So now I explained you where the data come from. Now you have on the other side your metabolomics data, and so the idea is to what we call map your data into these networks. It seems to be a simple question, but it's really a bottleneck in what we are doing. So as I said, the idea is to do omics mapping. So you can do that on also transcriptomics, since in the network we have the genes. You can do it with proteomic data because we have the proteins in the network, and metabolomics data. So we want to associate data on metabolites with the network. One of the main issues is the naming of metabolites. It seems a really basic observation, but here, if you just look at this, it was in 2013. If you look at pyruvate for Arabidopsis, for instance, one plant, pyruvate is named in different ways in different databases. So here you have 6 databases, and you see one time it's pyruvate, for KEGG it's C0022, I mean, sometimes capital letters and so on. And pyruvate is a simple example. If you move to something more complicated, it will be even more complicated. So it's really, as I said, a bottleneck, and most of the time, a really time-consuming step. So here is an example on the yeast data set I was mentioning at the beginning. On the left-hand side, you have what is provided in the paper, And on the right-hand side, you have what you have for metabolic network databases for KEGG or BioSeq. So really, one of the things that we are trying to push in the community is to use some ideas that are shared between the model and the metabolomics data sets. So INCHI is one of the solutions. It has the advantage to be standard, and also you can focus on some parts of the molecule. For instance, looking only at the 2D structure, or you can add some layers like isotopic layers and things like that. So it can be and it should be a good solution to have more easily the link between models and databases. So my advice here is that if you are doing metabolomics, it's good to use your internal naming conventions, but remember to also add some extra identifiers. It will really help when you will come and see us. So I won't go into details about that. We can talk about that after. So now I move really to the interpretation, and I will start with the one that most of the people do, which is pathway-based analysis. So if we come back to the to the example about yeast, you remember we have 10 metabolites, and then you can do the mapping and look in which metabolic pathways these metabolites can be found. So here you have the list of all the metabolic pathways in KEGG where I can find at least one of the metabolites. So so the first one is a bit, it's a generic pathway, so maybe not useful. But then as soon as you go to biosynthesis of amino acids, you find 7 metabolites, and so on and so on. So you think you have 24 pathways, or let's say 23, where you can find at least one metabolite. So then the question is, which pathways? Does it make sense that I find 7 out of 105 or 1 out of 4? So that's the question, and that's what is pathway enrichment trying to address. So I will just give you a really simple overview about pathway enrichment. There are plenty of options. I will give you the basic one. So coming back to the example, in the yeast metabolic network, you have 936 metabolites in KEGG. When we do the experiment, we have 9 or 10, depending on which one we select anyway. We have 9 metabolites among these 936. Then for one pathway, as I said, the biosynthesis of amino acids, you will find that out of the 108 metabolites, 7 are in this pathway. So the question then is, does it make sense? Is it significant or not? So what we are going to do is to say, okay, let's pick 9 metabolites randomly among the 936, and let's check how many times we are going to find more or less than 7 in this pathway. So we pick 9 metabolites and we count how many times we have more or less than 9. And if we do that, and then we do some corrections, we will see if it is significant or not. So if you do, for instance, here, hypergeometric test and Bonferroni correction, you see that it is significant to have 7 metabolites in this pathway. On the other hand, if you do hypergeometric test and Bonferroni correction, you will find that this other pathway is not significant. So it's a way to try and filter out the pathways based on the statistical test. So this part is available in the Phenomenal workflow. So Phenomenal, I don't know if you are aware of that, but the idea of Phenomenal is to provide an environment to deal with your metabolomics data, and an environment that you can deploy whether on your server or on cloud computing and so on. So you have several building blocks in Phenomenal and you can use them. And one of the key features is that you can use Galaxy. And within Galaxy, which is allowing you to have a complex workflow for data analysis, you can use this pathway enrichment that we developed. And so you can load data from TSV or Excel-like spreadsheet. Then you can do it will do the mapping, and then you can use several corrections and several tests. So basically, doing the pathway enrichment, you can do that in Phenomenal. Then when you do the Galaxy, will give you the different steps, and you will have some intermediary results. So how many of your metabolites were found in the network, how many pathways are concerned. It's another data set. But then, and for instance, for now, you can mainly do it on the human metabolic network. So, but you can also upload SBML files. And what you will get at the end is a table with the result of your pathway enrichment. So that's the output that you can get. So this is available in Phenomenal. This is available in MetExplore, but in also in MetaboAnalyst. So you have plenty of tools that allows you to do that. So the good side of pathway enrichment is that it will give you information on which pathways are most significant. And pathways are very convenient because they give you metabolic functions. And so you will be able to say, okay, glycolysis seems to be affected, and this other. So it's good because you have you can do priorities, and what is good also when you deal with the biologist and clinician, you have p-values with the limitations that we know. But the issue with this pathway enrichment, there are plenty of technical ones. So this one I showed doesn't take into account the fact that metabolites are increasing quite a lot and so on. There are some ways to do that. The correction that you are using, Bonferroni or Benjamin D. Hirschberg, will have impact on the final p-values. One of the key points, I will come back to that, is that the definition of pathways depends from change from one database to another. And also in metabolomics, there are some metabolites, you are definitely aware of that we cannot measure. So there are some pathways we will never be able to cover all of them. So we should take that into account in the pathway enrichment. And also a more statistical issue is that the pathways, they overlap. So that has some issues on the statistical point of view. So now I'm trying to show you a bit the limit of the pathways. It's quite handy, and I really don't say you don't have to use it. We use it also, but there are some limits. One of the limits is that every database will have a different definition of the pathways. So for instance, if you look at glycolysis, which everybody thinks, okay, it should be the same everywhere. If you look at KEGG, you have only one pathway for glycolysis and gluconeogenesis. If you look at human-seq, it is divided into 5 pathways. So if you do pathway enrichment, you may have something which is significant in one database and not in the other. So really, that's where it's important to know which database you are using. One of the other limits of pathways is that it's quite focused, and you kind of miss some connectivity information. Basically, here on the left-hand side, you have the TCA cycle. And if you look in a more systemic point of view, all these intermediary metabolites on the cycles, they are used in many other reactions. So in orange here, you have the TCA cycle, and you see that it is connected to many other reactions. So for instance, if you do some labeling experiment, what happens generally is that we start with following the labels and trying to make hypotheses on the TCA cycle, but then you realize that there are contributions from other metabolites that are just next door. So we end up building these networks. So that's one of the main limitations. When you do global and untargeted approaches, you may miss some information. So that's one of the main reasons why we move to networks, to kind of have a more holistic perspective. Here is just an example, coming back to the yeast example. That's in black, you have the metabolites that were in the list. And this is a sub-network I extracted using MetExplore, and all the colored parts are different pathways. So you see the process that is linking all these metabolites together. So metabolites are circles and reactions are rectangles. You see that these processes, if you want to move from one compound to another, you may go through several pathways. So you may miss some connectivity when you focus on one particular pathway. So that's why we go to the more general point of view, which is the network analysis. Network analysis is nice because you will have a systemic point of view. The limitation is that you need some algorithm to deal with these networks because they are really large. So the question we are going to ask is, we have a network with a few hundred thousands of reactions. We have, let's say, 10 metabolites. How can we connect these metabolites? What are the reactions that allow us to go from one metabolite to another? So for instance, here we have methionine and we have glutathione, which are moving in the yeast experiment. And we want to find automatically this kind of path between these metabolites. So what we are going to use is what we call topological analysis. Basically, it comes to a Google Map approach. You want to go from one place to another. What are the roads you have to follow to go from one place to another? So here, the important notion is that it is a generic question, and there are some algorithms to solve this kind of questions. So the first thing we have to do when we want to solve this question is to change the network into what we call a graph. So a graph is a mathematical formalism where you have nodes which are connected by edges. So here you have a compound graph. We are going to connect two nodes, a substrate and a product, two metabolites, if they are connected by a reaction. So for instance, A is the substrate of the first reaction and C is the product, so we are going to connect them. So we are going to build a graph like that. There are other options to build graphs, but we are going to focus on this one. So it's nice, now we have the roadmap of the metabolism, and then we can do some algorithms on that. But the issue is that if we want to look, for instance, to go from glucose to pyruvate, this simple question, if we look at the network, there are a large number of options. And if you think of a map, a street map, if you want to go from one place to another, you have an infinity of options, but then you will have to make decisions. I want the shortest one, or I don't want to pay toll, or whatever. So that's what we are going to do in terms of metabolism. One of the issues is that if you just take the network structure and you want to go from glucose to pyruvate, the path which is going from glucose to glucokinase through ADP, pyruvate kinase, and pyruvate is a path. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense in terms of biochemistry, but in terms of graphs, it makes sense. So what we are going to try to do using our kind of approaches is to avoid this kind of bad path and try to find the most relevant one, like the glycolysis. So the most well-known way to look for paths in a network is the shortest path. I want to go as fast as possible from one point to another. So I want to go through a minimum number of steps from one compound to another. So here, the shortest path is 2 steps, but that's the example I was talking about. You go from glucose, ADP, pyruvate. So that's not the one we want. One of the reasons of that is that we have, using shortest path, many wrong paths, is that in the network, you have some nodes like water here, which are connected to many reactions. And so all the paths, they may go through these nodes. So if you think about a map, for instance, in UK, you may end up going through London if you want to go from one point to another. So these hubs, they are not really relevant in terms of biochemistry, so we may want to avoid them. One way to avoid them is to try and avoid the nodes which have a large degree. The degree is the number of connections to a node. So if we come back here, the degree of the water is the number of connections to it. So it's really tens of connection. So these kind of hubs, they have large number of connections, so we can use what we call lightest path to try and avoid this highly connected, automatically the highly connected metabolites. So if we take, for instance, the degree and we use the square, we will end up in a more realistic path. So that's, for instance, the algorithm we implemented in MetExplore. So it's a relatively good way to avoid this kind of hubs. But the best way, to our mind, is really to use the biochemistry for each reaction. So let's say you do your path and you end up at glucose, and you have to make the decision whether you are going to glucose 6-phosphate or ADP. The best way to make the decision is to look at the structures of the substrates and products. So the carbons, for instance, of glucose are going to glucose 6-phosphate. So it's really easy to see it on this reaction. But remember, we have to do that for all the reactions of the network. So what we are doing now is, this is the graph I was mentioning. Glucose is connected to ADP. Glucose is connected to glucose 6-phosphate. But now we are going to look at how many carbons move from glucose to glucose 6-phosphate. And if you look at that, you will see that 6 carbons are moving from this one to this one, and 0 are moving from glucose to ADP. So what we are doing is that we are filtering the network. We are removing all the edges, all the connections where we don't have a carbon transfer. So we end up working with this network, and then with this network, you will avoid this kind of path that you don't want to look at. So that's currently the kind of network we are using, and I think that's the best way to do. So it gives you the best topological ways. So as I said, what I was talking about for now was really how you connect two metabolites. What we have in metabolomics is that we have more than two. So we could have more than two paths to look for. So the way we are doing that into MetExplore is, for instance, here you have 1, 2, 3, that's the same example, a few metabolites. So we are going to look for the paths between this metabolite and this one and this one, and keep only this path. So we are going to remove all the parts that are not in between two metabolites. And if you do that, you end up with really a smaller subnetwork. So I invite you to go and play with that. So that's a way to reduce the complexity and to focus really on subnetwork. And on yeast, we saw that looking into details, then we have a more relevant interpretation of the data. I don't have time to go into details about that, but that was a way we used the subnetwork extraction. Just a few words about the MetExplore. So it's free. It's online. You can register. It's not mandatory. If you register, you will be able to upload SBML files, to import cake networks. You will be able to change the networks. And you will be able to do to save some things that you cannot do in the public version. But the public version is already okay. We have some networks available. If yours is missing, as I said, you can whether upload the SBML or you can get in touch with us. Yeah, so there is a paper which is describing this tool. Okay, so I talked quite a lot about how network can be used for biochemical interpretation. But the other thing is that networks can also help you in annotating your data, so identifying metabolites, because the network is giving you a structure, and it can help you in making decisions when you have several options, especially in mass spectrometry. So in mass spectrometry, what could happen is that for one particular mass, you may have several metabolites with this mass. But then, let's say here you have two options in green. And if you look at the network structure, you will see that these other two metabolites, the red and the orange one, that, for instance, you identify, they are connected to one particular other metabolite, and which is the J-ranyl D-phosphate. And so it's more likely than your identification is this one, not the other one, based on the network structure. So we did an R package, which is called ProgMetab, that will, for every list of metabolites that you have, putative list of identifications, it will give you probabilities about which one is more likely to be the identification. So it's not the final solution, but it can guide your identification process. So we used several of these network-based identification approach, and it really helped in pointing out some potential metabolites that we should look at in the list. So that's another way to use the networks and the pathways. Okay, so just to finish and maybe to make a transition with the other webinars that will be held in Phenomenal, and more generally, if you want to go further, what I showed you is really a static picture of what is metabolism. So if we come back to the map option, I was not talking about the traffic. I was really talking about the roads. What ultimately we want to do is to see how much these roads are taken by the metabolism. So that's what we call fluxes. So here on the right-hand side, you have the flux maps. Let's say you have glucose, which is labeled, and you want to see how much of glucose is going through the glycolysis and how much is going through the pentose phosphate pathway. So it's quite used in microorganisms, but it's more and more used also in cancer research on cancer cell lines. So you can do that by doing really, let's say, complicated isotopic tracing experiments, but you can also you do that computationally, which is using approaches which are called constraint-based modeling, or more generally a flux balance analysis and things like that. So you can do plenty of nice things with that. You can do in silico knockouts. You can predict the growth of cells. You can look for lethal genes and so on and so on. So it's really more powerful, but on the other hand, it requires more parameters. It's a bit more technical to use. So that's why, for instance, in our lab, we do both. We do the graph, the network, and the pathways that I showed you, but we also do fluxes, but most often we do that on cells. Okay, so the few take-home messages before the questions. So the metabolic networks allows you to map your metabolomics data, but you have to keep in mind that since we built these networks based on genome information, we have the link between the genes, the proteins, and the metabolites, the reactions and the metabolites. So it's a good framework for integrating the omics data. It's not integration in terms of statistics, integration in terms of interpretation. So it's a good background for that. They can also be used for metabolite identification. I didn't go into details, but it's quite useful for that. My strong message is to take care of the identifiers. If you want to use networks, you will have to go through these really boring steps. And it can save us sometimes, and it can improve the relationship we have between the people doing the network analysis and the metabolomics. One of the key points is that pathways are good for, let's say, functional analysis. Networks, they will give you some more holistic way of analyzing your data, and you may identify some processes that are spanning several pathways. When you apply graph algorithms, if you go into that and you want to work on networks, you have to understand how it works, the algorithm, because there are some pitfalls that you have to be aware of, and it can lead to really bad conclusions. So there was a big controversy about scale-free networks and things like that in the at the end of the previous century, let's say, and so we have to take care of that. So, and then the next step, as I said, is that the same networks that I show you, the SBML files, the Recon model, for instance, you can use this network to do some flux analysis. So before we move to the question, I'm gonna, so that's almost all the people who worked on the project. A lot of the job is done was done by Clément Freinet. So this is how you end up at the end of your PhD. So now he's a bit more healthy because he's in postdoc. So he's at Imperial College for now. So Clément did a lot of work on the network, the graph algorithm aspects. As I said, many of the things on the pathways are available in the Phenomenal workflow. And I would like to thank Phenomenal for the funding. So for instance, Etienne, who did all the development on the pathway enrichment is funded by Phenomenal. And of course, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I move to the last slide. Maybe Namrata, you want to have it? Or I can mention that. So if you go on this web page, you will see the next webinars provided, in particular for Phenomenal. The next one is going to be about metabolomics and systems biology. There will be some a bit of overlap with this one, but there will be some other more statistical approach about networks and metabolomics data. Okay, so now I'm ready to answer your question. I guess it's going to be in the chat. So feel free to ask. Whoa, there is a long one. I should read it. You have explained how to connect metabolites using several strategies, shortest path, etc. Is there a way to include information on the energy or kinetics involved in select optimal connection? Yeah, so indeed, the algorithm, as I said, can be constrained using other kind of data. So, for instance, I explained you how to use the chemistry, which carbon to filter the network, but you can use the kinetic. You can use kinetic as a constraint. You cannot model the quantities of metabolites, but you can use it as a constraint. I hope it answers the question. Really, the idea is to change the algorithm, but I'm not aware of tools that allow you to do that directly for now. You may have to go through a bit of development for that. You talked about a few classical ways to obtain metabolic data networks. Recently, Biochem4G, a graph database for metabolic model was published. Do you think that this type of data storage is more adapted to metabolism or exploration? I am not aware about this one, but I think that the concept behind is the Neo4j database framework. So it's, I think it's, sorry, I moved from one screen to another. I think it's Maria who is asking this question. Yeah, so I think it could be more efficient because it's a graph-based database. I won't go into the technical details. Then the question is which algorithms are available in there. I don't know which ones they have, but it could be more efficient in terms of speed and time of computation. Okay, I try to go through the question. There are plenty. Alexandra, have you thought about using Petri nets? Okay, so yeah, there are some people who are using Petri nets. So Petri net is a formalism where you will move from one node to another, what we call tokens. So it's kind of like a game. Each reaction, you will allow one or two tokens to go from the substrate to the product. So it's a way to model. People are using that because you can then ask some question: is this metabolic path feasible in terms of stoichiometry? Do we have dead end in the network? Something like metabolites are trapped. Do we have some cycles and things like that? So yes, Petri nets are used, They have some overlap with constraint-based modeling, which is done on linear equations modeling. But yeah, people are doing that. It's quite useful also for visualization, the Petri nets. So there are works from I think it's I don't remember the name. There are some groups working on that. Please, could you explain the difference between the type of network? Okay, that's an important point. So it's Alfredo who is asking between the difference between this type of network and the correlation network. So there are the term network is used everywhere. You have social network and so on. In metabolomics, it's also quite used now. So the one you may know are the correlation network, the molecular network, and let's say the genome scale metabolic network. The network I presented you, the connections are based on biochemical reactions. So it's biochemistry, the edges. Correlation, you are going to connect two metabolites if their concentrations are evolving in the same way. So you have plenty of options to do that. I think it will be addressed in the next webinar. So it's statistical relationships between metabolites. It could be that this statistical relationships is related to a biochemical transformation, but it could be that there are other reasons that these two metabolites are connected. So my point here is that the information is different. So it's really important to keep in mind to know where the edges and the connections in your network are coming from, because there is a different sense if you are using correlation or biochemical networks. And the last one is the molecular networking that you may be aware of, like GNPS and things like that. Here, the idea is to once again make correlations between, but not between the metabolites themselves, but between their MSMS spectra. So if they have similar MSMS spectra, they will be connected. So it can be used then for identification. So that's a good remark, and yes, take care about that. Metabolites are not just play roles as substrate and product, but also signaling. Yeah, okay, that's also. So Madhu is asking about, so he's mentioning the fact that these metabolites, they are not only substrates and products, they also can regulate, they can also be signaling elements and regulators. So this is another layer, and people are working on mixing metabolic networks, the one I presented, and regulatory networks. The issue is that they are less complete, the regulatory networks, for all the organisms. There are some organisms, so for instance, I think for E. coli, the people are more and more, have more and more of these regulatory networks. Then also, one of the challenges is how you are going to connect them in terms of modeling. How are you going to say, okay, this metabolite is blocking this reaction? So you will have different kind of modeling. So one will be quantitative, one will be not quantitative. So then there are some issues about which model you are going to use for that. But definitely, that's one of the future direction that you can look at.
Thank you, Fabian. I don't see any further questions on the chat window. But in case you have more questions, please feel free to use the contact form on the Phenomenal website, or use the email address in the training form that you filled up to join this webinar. Thank you so much, Fabian, for your wonderful presentation. And if you want to see more webinars, do visit the EBI website. The link is on the screen. And we have another Phenomenal-based webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, Metabolomics in Systems Biology. Thank you so much again, and hope to see you in the next webinar.
Yeah, thanks for your attention. Bye.
Bye.